Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be teaching you exactly how you can make a wet molded sheath without a mold. A lot of the tutorials out there will tell you that you need a mold, a wooden mold, and then a plate that goes around it, and lots of clamps and lots of pressure and this, that and the other to make a wet molded sheath. You don't, and I'm going to show you how. So what you want to do first is you want to cut your leather. So I'm using a 1.4, I think it's 1.4, 1.5 mil Italian shoulder. You can do it with non-veg tan, but this is veg tan. If you do it with non-veg tan, you've got to line it, so it's got to have enough structure behind it, because non-lined chrome tan will not wet mold. So in order to do it without the molding and without the clamps, you need to glue it around the edge, and you need to do this with a glue that won't dissolve again in the water. So I'm using a glue from Pro Italia Plus. It's EcoSar 116 ADNG, and it is technically water based, but once it dries it will not come apart again, so you don't need to worry about that. So you want to get your edges glued up, and then you want to stick them together, but make sure they're 100% dry before you stick them together, or they will come apart. So make sure that that's properly done, or this will not work, so be careful. Once you've done that, you want to get your top edge beveled, because it's very difficult to do this around whatever it is that you're molding. And then you want to get a bowl of water. So I'm using a warm water, just because it soaks into the leather a little bit better. And here's a bit of a time capsule. I'm not sure what they're called actually, but here's a little image showing the water soaking in. This takes about half an hour for it to fully soak in. And a lot of the mistakes that people make is that they try and wet mold instantly. So they wet it down and then they stick their thing in and try and mold it. It won't work because it's so wet still from the water. At this point it will not take a shape, it will just relax back out. It's very plastic at the moment. So you want to dry it until it's basically feels dry. So you don't want it to feel wet at all. It was in that paper for about 2 or 3 hours. I think it's called casing the leather. So you soak it completely and then you let it return to a dry feeling state. And then you want to push your whatever it is you're molding, your knife, your firearm if you're in the US, whatever it is that you want to mold, you want to push that in to the point where you want it to be molded. Because at this stage you do not want it to move. Take some clips, go all the way around the outside. The glue shouldn't come apart. This is just a little bit of a safety precaution, shall we call it, just to give it a little bit of structure, because it's wet, so we don't want it to pull apart, because the leather is it's still wet. I mean, it's not damp, it's not soaking wet, but it's got a bit of moisture still in it, obviously. So we want to clamp it all of the way around so that it just sets a little bit in place whilst it's still drying. So the first thing you want to do is take your fingers and go around the outside, and then get a bone folder, or a pen would work. If you're doing this at home without lots and lots of fancy tools, a pen would work absolutely fine. A thin biro pen is all you need. But first of all, go around it with your fingers, get that bend into the leather around your piece, because you're trying to fight the leather's natural urge to spring back. So I'm moving the clips around a bit. I'm going up and down with my fingers and with the bone folder, just to start getting into that nooks and crannies and grooves around the piece. So as you can see, it does take a long time to do it, but take your time, because it is really worth it. my fingers will slowly go a little bit orange because the dye will come out. It's vegetable tan, so a little bit of the dye will come out in your fingers. The very few leather dyes are what's called colour fast, so they will come out a little bit when it's wet. So as you start getting that shape in there, the leather will stretch around it. The leather will mould. That's the whole purpose of this. Leather does mould really beautifully, actually. So take your time with that bone folder, get around all of the little details, because one thing to note is the closer you get all of the details of your wet mould, the tighter it will fit. Now, one thing that you may have noticed is I wrapped it with cling film, or I think it's called saran wrap if you're in the US, because one, I don't want to get my knife wet and it rust if that's possible, and two, because you want that little fraction of a millimeter around the outside of your knife inside the sheath, so that you can still get it out. Because if you don't have that saran wrap on it, you might actually struggle to get it out, because as leather dries, it shrinks. Now, I've sped this footage up a lot. This was this was nearly an hour of wet moulding, so it's all very sped up. But as you can see, it is coming into its own. It's coming to life very quickly, and it slowly molds into that shape. If you compare this to how it started, you can see that the leather is taking the curves of the blade, which is exactly what you want, because it will hug it. And then one of the biggest tests you can do of a well wet molded piece is shake it upside down once it's dried. If it comes out, it's not wet molded properly. And that's what we're doing. We're doing proper wet molding at home that you can do yourself. All you need is a $20 piece of leather, a $10 piece of leather from Tandy's, or wherever in the wherever in the world you are, a bowl of water, and a knife to wet mold, and then a pen or a bone folder. Now, this is a tool that I'm just using to get into those tiny little creases. It's designed for getting creases out of alligator scales. I'm just using it to get a little bit of curvature into some of the nooks, which you don't have to do. You can just use the bone folder or get a blunt, like a butter knife. And as you, I'm going back to the bone folder now, just because it's a little bit easier to control. But we're just about there, and the reason you have to keep going is because the leather, as it dries, if you're not continuously molding it, it will spring back. It will lose a little bit of the molded definition. And then a little bit of a go over it with the bone folder one more time, and it will be all done. Now, what you don't see at the end of this, because I couldn't get my camera in the right position, was when you fully molded it and you got it to a shape that you like. I'm putting it in front, just before that cut, I put it in front of a room dryer. You could use blow dryer as well, because if you just let it air dry, it'll relax a little bit. But if you want it to be really rock solid and hard, so that it doesn't lose its shape, you need to force dry it. So I've now drawn a line 3 millimeters away from the I think it was about 3 millimeters, whatever distance you want, but I've used 3 millimeters just to keep it nice and tight around the outside. And then we're going to prick mark it with a 3 millimeter pricking iron. If you have a 4 or a 5, you could use that too. This is not a particularly hard wearing thing, because the stitches aren't really going to take any abuse in this at all, because the leather is rock solid from being force dried in the I'm trying to remember what it's called, space heater, that's the one. And now it's time to stitch it. So I'm using a 0.5mm linen thread. You could use polyester if you wanted something a little bit more durable for if this was going on a belt clip. Now one thing I will note is you won't be able to attach anything to it after the fact. So if you want this to have a belt clip on it, attach that to the raw leather before you mold it, because you won't be able to get your needles between the two shells. Otherwise it's not really possible. So we're basically done at this stage. We just need to stitch it, cut it, and then burnish it. If you're looking for ways to support your favourite creators, and by that I mean me of course, I have now started a Patreon, and the link for that will be below, so please go and check that out. It's only a few dollars a month, and I really make sure you do the overstitch at the end, because the top of anything is always where the most pressure is going. Use a fresh blade for this, because cutting through 5mm of hardened leather or 3mm of hardened leather is not very easy. It really isn't. So you want as sharp a blade as you can possibly get when you're going through this. So I'm using a fresh scalpel blade. You can use a box cutter if that's what you've got at home. I'm trying to make this tutorial as simple for anyone as possible, because I want you guys to be able to wet mold your stuff without having to buy something wet molded, because we buy enough stuff as it is. And then get a nice curvature on the bottom going around that. I used a wing divider to mark that out. It was 3mm from the stitching line. And there we go. It will get a little bit lighter as you go forwards, because there's still a little bit of moisture in it. Leather takes days to fully dry because it's all absorbed into the fibers. Nice quick sand to get the edges smooth before you burnish them. One tip for you guys: if you're going to burnish something with water or beeswax or whatever it is, or Tokonol in this case, the most important thing about burnishing is by far sanding, because you want that leather as smooth as possible before you even touch it with any burnishing agent. Bevel it to keep it smooth, although to round out the edge, I'm sorry. And then it's time to burnish. I'm using Tokonol, which is a burnishing agent, but if you're doing this at home, you can use water and beeswax, or just water by itself. You can also use a little bit of white glue. If you water that down to 50% and then you rub that in, it will do a very, very similar thing. And then give it a nice shine with your rag. You can use a t-shirt for this, or if you've got a piece of canvas, because the way burnishing works is you're heating up that surface, and then the compound that you put on it seals it. That's all burnishing is. It's sealing the edge. And there we go. I'm actually really pleased with how this came out. The longer you spend with your bone folder, the better. And thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps the channel so much. And I will see you next time.